Good evening, everybody. This is Andy Pedraza with Special Effects Academy on the start of the week session for April 21st of 2019. We'll go through our usual agenda, the prior week's results, our currency strength meter for the past week and the past month, any fundamental announcements scheduled for the week, a look at the major currency pairs on the daily charts, any setups we see in progress, and a few words in conclusion. We'll start off with our ledgers. The long-term ledger has had no activity this year. No trades have been triggered, so it's completely blank. Our intermediate term ledger has 5 open trades, some at profit, some at a loss right now, and one closed trade, which was actually closed 2 weeks ago, so I'm not going to cover it. So essentially no change this week other than we did add towards the end of the week a long on the Euro Swiss. And the short-term ledger for our weekly trading, we were up 3.68% for the week, weighted pip profit of 112.9 pips on 6 trades that were taken, 3 winners, 3 losers, but the winners did outweigh the losses by a significant factor, which just goes to prove what we've said all along, that you don't need to be right more often than wrong. The secret here is managing the trades right, and you will come out ahead. So a winning week, and obviously this is the short-term account, so we went in all cash for the weekend. No open trades at this time. Notes and opportunities for improvement. We did take those lessons learned from the prior weekend. We caught the rest of the Swiss collapse on the short-term account. And as I mentioned on the intermediate term, we did open up one trade into Swiss weakness towards the end of the week as a continuation with the Euro Swiss. Otherwise, not a particularly noteworthy week, though the Euro did have a sort of meltdown on Thursday on outlook worries that cropped up in some of the statements that were released towards the end of the week. And of course, it was a short trading week due to the Easter holiday. We'll take a look at our relative strength meter for the past week and month. For the past 30 days, we have a volatility very close to 4%. The Australian dollar was the key winner for the month, followed closely by the Canadian. The Swiss, the Euro, the Pound, the Yen were very middle of the pack. To some degree, the US dollar as well, though it did fare well against everybody except the Aussie and the Canadian. The New Zealand, the clear loser, the Kiwi lost ground against pretty much everybody in the past month, and the metals didn't fare any much better, with silver and gold both losing ground to pretty much everyone. The past week, however, had the Australian very middle of the pack. The Canadian was, it didn't have a bad week, I should say, but it did lose ground against the dollar and the yen. The Swiss, of course, the key and clear loser for 2 weeks running now, and we did catch most of that move this prior week. The Euro, very middle of the pack, and again, it did have a poor showing towards the end of the week as it lost ground that actually was doing quite well until Thursday, when it just collapsed in on itself. The Pound losing ground against everybody except the Swiss and the Kiwi. The Yen, the clear winner. The Kiwi, the clear loser. And on winners, we should add the US dollar, also gained ground against everybody except the Yen. Silver made a comeback. Gold continues trending very, very much down. Moving on to the fundamental announcements for the week, we have well, I should start with at the top. We have the CPI coming out of Australia on Tuesday night, so we will be trading that one live. Not because CPIs tend to move the market a whole lot, but the Australian is sort of fraying at the seams. and anything literally could kick it in one direction or the other. So I will be trading this one live simply to see if we get anything out of it. Indeed, we may trade the trim mean CPI at 8:30, but either way, we'll trade one or the other or both. I will clarify that later on in the week or as early as the email summary we will send out after this session. More importantly, on Wednesday, we have the Bank of Canada interest rate decision for the month. That's scheduled for 10 a.m. That will be traded live. It's accompanied by a monetary policy report, a rate statement, a press conference 15 minutes earlier. So it will be a very interesting morning. And we do have the Bank of Japan interest rate decision in the evening. And my apologies, that one should be marked as live traded for Wednesday night at 10 p.m. So I'll make sure that's clarified in the email summary, but that one will be traded live as well. Then we have Thursday with Tokyo CPI and Friday with the GDP out of the US, which I'm on the fence. We may end up trading that one early morning Friday, but maybe not. I haven't decided yet. I'll make that decision later during the week. And with that, we're going to move into our charts, starting with oil, the WTI prices. We can see that oil continues a splendid recovery, though it did take a break this week. It didn't go down. We didn't have any retracement out of oil in the week that just ended, but it did go sideways for the week after the initial spurt that it had at the beginning. It just went sideways the rest of the week. It is still hanging out at that level of resistance at the 64.25 that I had been targeting since the beginning of the year. It hit it a week ago, but has been very reluctant to go any further. The next stop, of course, is going to be at the 70.5, that next level towards the top, and then ultimately the 77 at the very top of the chart. But there may be some retracement in the works, or at least some sideways action, assuming it does continue rising. I think it's overextended itself a little bit. So we'll have to see how that plays out. Obviously, the market's going to do whatever the market's going to do. We're just along for the ride. But I do think it's gone up a little bit too quickly and too strongly, and we may need a little bit of a breather before everything's said and done. Euro dollar, as I mentioned, a very poor Thursday for the euro. We can see that the euro had been rising very nicely and then just collapsed on Thursday, and Friday did nothing much. Of course, markets were very quiet on Friday since it was Good Friday. Going into the Easter weekend, so there wasn't just enough volume to make it go anywhere. We'll have to keep a close eye on all the euro pairs to see how they start the week off, but for now, be very careful with the euro. We did see that strong weakness. That's an oxymoron, but you know what I mean. It weakened very strongly, and of course, we're waiting to see what it's going to be doing moving forward. The pound dollar also went down, and again, the European currencies in general had a very bad end of the week. So both the pound and the euro went down against most of the other currencies on Thursday, Friday. The one exception was the Swiss, and only because the Swiss was weakening since the week before. So the Swiss franc pretty much, I guess, anticipated that weakness out of the euro currencies and had been going down for 2 weeks now and counting. We'll see how this week treats the European currencies, but euro and pound both dropped significantly Thursday into Friday. USD JPY took a complete break. It just didn't move all week long. A little bit of weakness towards the end of the week, but it didn't even clear the intra-week low. So in essence, a very sideways trending pair. It did hit resistance at whatever that is, the 112.15. It is still following the trend line, so it's still bullish, but it did take the entire week off. Looks like the entire Japanese economy and its currency took the week off for Easter. USD Canadian, pretty much the same, a little bit still of weakness. So it was going up, but it didn't clear the most recent high. It seems to have stalled at the top of that wedge that we can see there on the screen. and we're still waiting for it to really to pick a direction. Obviously, my bias is that this thing at some point is going down, but we're not trying to predict when it does it. We'll just keep an eye open, and when we see the move, we'll jump in. There is no predicting with this thing, and it could go up as easy as down. USD Swiss, it's made a higher high, a high that's not been seen since November of 2017. That's not even on the chart. It's that far back. So the last time it was this high was in November of 2 years ago. And well, that's all she wrote. We took most of that move. We took on a short-term trade, as we did with the Euro Swiss as well. And now we're waiting to see what the new week brings us. So if we're going to see, now I do think the USD Swiss, it always does find resistance right above the parity level, but it went as high as 101.65. So it cleared parity by 165 pips. That's huge. So there is no telling. This may be the beginning of a wider move towards the top, and we may see highs that we haven't seen in half a decade, or it may find resistance there and drop. At this point, it's going to be an observation game. We will trade it in whichever direction it seems to be going. Aussie dollar, also a very sideways week. There is a lot of signs of weakness coming out of the Australian economy, and that has affected this pair. For some reason, though, it chose to try to go against the dollar, so it was actually strengthening against the dollar, but that quickly failed. So we see those two long wick candles on, I'm going to say that was Thursday and Wednesday, and it really didn't have enough strength to move away from the top of the Ichimoku cloud on the daily, or that that trend line that's dropping. So I'm bearish on this pair, but I'm waiting for a good entry on it. Well, let me rephrase that. We're already short on this pair on the intermediate account and carrying profit, though not a lot. But I am waiting for it to make a deeper move, and we may indeed end up trading this one on multiple accounts, short-term and long-term, intermediate, whatever. So it's going to be depending on what this thing does. But for now, I really don't have a whole lot of confidence that it's going to go up. The smart money is on this thing going down. Kiwi dollar, same thing. We're also short on the intermediate account and carrying profit. This one is carrying a larger amount of profit than the Aussie dollar. And I'm still waiting for it to drop more towards the bottom of this chart. That's the direction we're trading it. And there is no change on that. We can see the trend line break on the daily, as well as the break of that support level at the 67.15, the red line right above current price action. So there's really nothing propping it up. I would say that the next level of support is going to be at the 66. And I don't have that marked on the screen, but you can see those prior highs and lows too as well, where they bounced off that line on the 66. So we'll see if it does have enough strength to go down that far. It's an intermediate trade, the one we have open. So there's no rush. We're going to let it play out till however it goes. Of note also on this one is that the MACD is getting more and more negative, and we have a Williams %R that's completely at the bottom. So very bearish chart, and we're already trading it in that direction. The Aussie Canadian, well, the Aussie's weakening, the CAD's weakening. We don't know which way any of them are trying to go, and hence this one has pretty much hit a level and is not moving far beyond it. It's at the 95.65, give or take. I guess my bias is that this one will drop as well. I'm betting more on Canadian strength than I am on Aussie strength, just on the back of oil prices. But this one has refused to move in that direction, and I am not going to trade it until it does start moving. I'll probably be placing pending orders on this one to take us in if we see a move down. But again, it'll happen when it happens. Euro Swiss, our other big winner, we cleared, I forget how much, but probably around 100 pips on this one. And the euro, again, the euro collapsed towards the end of the week, and that affected this trade. It did take us out on our trailing stop. So we made our profit, but we can see how the movement just faltered on euro weakness Wednesday, Thursday. So Wednesday, Thursday, this one just went into our reverse, took us out, and then stabilized. We opened another trade on the intermediate account, one that we can hold for longer than a single week. And that's simply because both the euro and the Swiss may have weakened, but I think the Swiss weakness is more endemic than anything the euro is doing. So this one doesn't have to, but should resume its upward trend. This week will tell us whether that's right or wrong. Again, you have to take some calculated risk along the way in order to make profit, but we do have a good potential for at least another 150 pips before it reaches the top of the visible portion of this chart, and that's not a huge distance. So that may easily be covered in a single week. The MACD is rising. The Williams %R is also very much at the top. So everything is screaming buy on this pair. So we did enter that trade, as I said, towards the end of the week after taking profit on the short-term movement, and we'll see where it takes us this week. Euro pound, the euro and the pound both have problems. So this one is the euro is winning this fight. Despite all the euro weakness, it still continues to go up, but very slowly. It's at the top of the Ichimoku cloud. If I see a decent breakout, I will trade this one up. I don't think it has enough room at the bottom to be worth our while if we want to short it. So I'm looking for a long entry, but I'm waiting for the right long entry. There's no sense in rushing this. Euro JPY, another one that was rising nicely until the euro weakness kicked in. Well, I should say it was rising nicely the week before last, and last week it was very sideways until the euro imploded and pushed this pair back down towards the trend line. So this is another one where we're going to have to see which direction the week starts off in and see if we can ride this one whichever way it wants to go. At this point, it could as easily go up as down. There is nothing in the chart that's giving us a clear edge as to which way it's going to bounce. So it'll either bounce off that trend line and head up or continue collapsing toward the bottom of the chart. Either way, we're going to try to pick the entry and ride this one. Euro Canadian, another one that has not really found the direction. It is still following that trend line toward the bottom, but we can see that it's been very sideways since around the beginning of the year. So it established the top of a sideways channel around January, hit the bottom of that channel around late February, and since then has been bouncing between those two extremes. So we're going to have to see which currency recovers quicker, the euro or the CAD, in order to trade this one. But this is another one that has a very nice potential in either direction. We don't care which way it moves. All we care is that it moves. So this one's also worth keeping an eye on. Pound JPY, not much to see here. The pound has hit the doldrums. It's just not moving in either direction. Once Brexit was decisively postponed until October, that may change because there's still a chance, a very slim chance, but a chance nonetheless, that Theresa May will manage to have some sort of plan approved in time for a Brexit on the 22nd of May. That is still her target. That is still the goal. Nobody thinks she can do it, but it could still happen, in which case this one will start moving again. Otherwise, we're going to have to wait for something else to wake it up and hopefully for it to pick a direction that we can ride. And if it does, it's going to be a nice opportunity for a longer term trade because it will start most likely trending instead of bouncing on every bit of news that comes out. So no news is going to be good news if it picks a trend. And if we can ride that trend till the fourth quarter of the year, October, when the new deadline comes on Halloween, then it might be a very decent moneymaker. Not just the pound JPY, but all the pound pairs. But again, we're going to have to wait for it to show some sort of decisiveness. Aussie JPY, so we saw Aussie strength the week before last, and then very sideways action this past week. And again, I don't want to read too much into the market because it was Easter, and a lot of people took the week off. So perhaps the volume just wasn't there. This week, everybody should be back. Everybody who missed out last week is going to try to make up for it. So we may have a very interesting week if everybody jumps in at once. So we'll have to look at the market, see what it does these first 24 hours of trading, and take it from there. Euro New Zealand also went into a little bit of a meltdown, and that was towards the beginning of the week. The Kiwi weakened significantly, forcing this pair up towards the test of the trend line. And then it pretty much collapsed along the same day and traded sideways the entire week. Now, don't be confused here. The Kiwi weakened significantly. We see this on other Kiwi pairs. The thing is, the Euro weakened as well. So both of them weakening at the same time, this pair went sideways. But this is another key pair because now it's at a point when we do have a break out, so it is technically a long trade right now. But if it does reverse itself and start heading towards the bottom, there is a nice chunk of change to be made there to the tune of about 500 pips. So I don't care in which direction we trade it, so long as at the very least I get 500 pips, I'm going to be a very happy camper. So this pair is also going on the radar for the coming week or weeks, so we'll see how long this takes. Pound Canadian, again, the pound weakening, the CAD weakening, both of them going sideways, doing this, that, and the other. This one has not had much movement. It has been better for the CAD, so we can see that the last week was a significant improvement for the CAD as it strengthened against the pound, but it didn't break out of any of the levels of support, at least not significantly, and it's still just hanging out. So another one where we have to wait and see what direction the market picks. And last but not least, the pound Swiss, same thing. Even though we had pound weakness, and the pound weakness was brutal these past couple of weeks, it really hasn't moved as much as some of the other Swiss pairs. So it's gone up to a prior level of resistance. It's pretty much inside a very tightening wedge right now. And I don't know, this one could in fact start trending sideways if both currencies continue weakening. So we'll have to see what happens. I would be much, much happier, or rather my bias is going to be on this one dropping at the first sign of Swiss strength. We're going to have a nice potential drop all the way down to the 124 at the bottom of the chart. And that's 700 pips. So again, a lot of these charts are starting to give us inklings of good potential, but we have to wait for the right entry. It's there's no sense in trying to guess a direction and going in, because every time you guess, you're probably going to be wrong. So wait till the movement starts, then jump in. And that is the end of our pairs for the charting this week. And setups in progress, as we can see on the screen. The pound pairs, I already mentioned this, they're completely becalmed, and there is no movement on the pounds to speak of, but it is worth keeping an eye on it in case we see a trend kicking off. The trend may be slow, but if we see the beginning of the trend, we're going to jump in because it might be a trend that lasts all the way into October. The euro pairs, euro significantly weakened at the end of the week on outlook concerns. There was a few statements coming out that revised the outlook for the euro, and the market did not like it. We're also going into some key earnings statements coming out of the EU banks, and most of these are, well, they're not doing well. And the banking sector is a good chunk of the European economy. So if these earnings statements come out poorly, that is going to add even more downward pressure on the euro. So we're going to be keeping an eye on those earnings statements coming out. Canadian pairs, the Canadian also seems lost, and this is a general theme. You see how many of the charts that we were looking at were just completely sideways last week. Part of that, of course, Easter, but at the same time, pairs like the Canadian pairs that should have been moving, if only on the improving oil price, have not. They've either been going backwards or going sideways, and there's no telling how long that's going to last. But at some point, there's going to have to be a correction. The Japanese pairs, the yen pairs, they're also at a crossroads. For one, EU concerns are making the yen stronger. And at the same time, the fact that Brexit got postponed is making the yen weaker because the Brits are pulling money out of Japan, thinking they've bought themselves time until October. So this is adding pressure in both directions on the yen pairs, which is also an explanation, besides Easter, of why the yen was so sideways for the past week. Again, we're going to have to wait and see what happens this week as it begins. It may all have been attributable to Easter or not. Time will tell. So we're going to be keeping a very close watch on all these significant currencies as the week starts. And last but not least, we have the Australian, the Aussie pairs. There is still a lot of signs of impending doom coming out of Australia, but it really hasn't affected the currency as everybody expected it would. This may be a case similar to the Canadian, which should be stronger but isn't. The Australian should be weaker but isn't. And we'll see if there is some need to the statements that have been coming out, and at some point the Australian dollar goes even lower. The problem there is also that the Australian weakened throughout the entire 2018. So it was a full year of just free fall for the Australian dollar. And despite any bad news coming out, it may simply have bottomed out. It may have hit bottom and it's simply not going to go any lower. Who knows? But we'll be keeping an eye on the Australian pairs as well, whether we have a breakout towards the bottom to go short, or we have a consistent bounce towards the top, something of a recovery or at least a retracement that we can trade. We'll take that as well. We're very agnostic. We don't care which way your pair moves. We're just going to trade it if it moves. And that's pretty much the end of it this week. Not a whole lot of words of wisdom here, just hoping everybody enjoyed their Easter break. It was definitely a slow market week as Easter interrupted the flow after Wednesday. Other than that Euro movement, we can see that the market just took a break. This week may be a fast mover if everyone piles back in. Don't know. We'll just be watching it carefully, but decisively to see if we can make some money. And we're still waiting for a decent trend, which I guess was most of the theme of this presentation, is everything going very sideways or contrarian. So we're looking for a trend to be established, especially the pound pairs and the CAD pairs are key currency pairs where we should be seeing a trend, but we're not. And at some point, they're going to have to start catching up, and we'll be ready for when they do. And that's going to be it for me on this session. Thank you for being with us. And does anybody have any comments or questions before we call it a wrap? Okay, then thank you very much. We'll be back tomorrow for the 8 p.m. session. Have a great rest of an Easter Sunday.